There is a story circulating around the internet involving a case that Neil Gorsuch heard and was actually the only dissenting judge in the case, involving a truck driver who was fired because he abandoned the load that he was driving in Illinois. Now, this case is really interesting because it shows the type of thought process Neil Gorsuch has when he's ruling on cases and how he wants to apply the exact literal wording of the laws that pertain to various cases. So this case has to do with the truck driver. His name was Alphonse Maddin. And apparently he was driving a truck in rural Illinois in very, very cold temperatures, and he was running out of gas. And so he was communicating with his employers about the fact that he was about to run out of gas, and they gave him this muddled message about where he can refuel. And so, long story short, his truck stops working. It stops running. And he finds himself stranded in rural Illinois with the temperature at negative 27 degrees Fahrenheit, okay? So at that point, TransAm told him, like, you gotta stick around. In about an hour, somebody will be there to help you out. Although no one ended up showing up in the hour that they told him that someone would show up. So with the temperature outside an Arctic level, negative 27 degrees Fahrenheit, the brakes on the 50+ foot trailer froze in the locked on position. Maddin radioed in and was told to expect a repairman within the hour.
So I just want to explain one part of the story that's important and not so clear. There's a truck and then there's a cabin, and you could actually separate the two. So the brakes on the truck are frozen. So if he tries to go out on the road, it'll be super dangerous to drive with the brakes basically being broken. And he has to go really, really slow because the brakes are on the whole time.
Right.
So they're telling him either drive the truck or just wait there for someone to come out and repair it. Now, if the cabin heat is working, maybe he could pull that off, but that leads to the next part of the story.
Right, exactly. So he essentially like bundled up and waited for the repairman. Repairman didn't show within the hour. When he woke up, he realized that his body was blue, he couldn't feel his feet, and he was starting to panic because he realized that he was in a dangerous situation. He realized he couldn't wait any longer. So at that point, according to The Guardian, he unhitched the cab from the trailer, and despite being low on fuel, managed to drive it to a gas station a few miles away. Then, within 15 to 30 minutes, returned to find a repairman finally on the scene. After repairs, he delivered the meat. So the meat was abandoned for a short period of time so he could go refuel and come back. When he came back, the repairman was there. Everything was fine, right? And so he used human judgment, which I think most people would use in a situation like that to save their own lives. Well, the company that he was working for, TransAm, decided to fire him, and this case went to court.
So before we get to how the judges decided and how Gorsuch decided, one more important thing you really need to know. The heat in the cabin was not working. So when he checked the temperature gauge within the cabin, 3 hours later, he waited longer than the hour, he waited 3 hours. Within the car, it was negative 14 degrees. He couldn't feel his feet, and when he called one of his friends, he was mumbling his speech, which meant that he might have had hypothermia. He's gotta get out of there, he might die. But Gorsuch thinks, no, if a company has given you an order, you follow it.
That's right.
It doesn't matter.
That's right. So he's very pro-business, and so this is the case that keeps coming up when it comes to why he shouldn't be confirmed as the next Supreme Court justice to replace Antonin Scalia. So through a series of rulings in Maddin's favor, which the company TransAm challenged, his case ended up before Gorsuch and two other federal appeals court judges on the powerful 10th Circuit. Now, while Maddin had largely won because he was deemed justified in putting his safety above the company's instructions, Gorsuch disagreed because the law states that it protects someone refusing to operate their truck, whereas Maddin had in effect refused not to operate it. So that shows you the specificity that Gorsuch focuses on when it comes to making these rulings. Forget human judgment, forget the fact that there was a human life on the line here, forget the fact that the law, according to all these other judges, could apply in this individual's defense. But Gorsuch is like, no, I'm gonna interpret this very literally, and I'm gonna rule pro-business, and that's exactly what happened in this case.
You know, I think people are being way too kind to Gorsuch on this, even his critics are, and I'm gonna explain why in a second. But again, more context. Through the 7 years that this court case took, it went through several different courts and 7 different judges. Every other judge said, oh, he's clearly right, and the law does apply to him. So there's a lot of different reasons why you can rule that way. They can say, okay, first of all, you could argue that he didn't operate the truck part. Okay, then it's totally technically within the definition of the law. Okay, you could argue that no, the law was written slightly wrong, but it's okay because the Department of Labor, which has jurisdiction, has the ability to interpret that law so that it is not interpreted in an absurd fashion, which would force this guy to either die or be fired, which is a very normal legal doctrine. It's called the Chevron doctrine. Gorsuch says, no, I will not allow the Department of Labor to make any reasonable conclusions. If a law is written unclearly, it must be enforced unclearly and unreasonably. But why? The Department of Labor can actually interpret it. And every other judge is saying they should. He's like, no, I will not let them do that. Now, the reason why I say that they're being too kind to Gorsuch, they point all that out. But I want someone out there to find one case where Gorsuch said, I will enforce the law letter by letter if it went in favor of a human being and not a corporation. Oh, I want to see him rule against the corporation because, hey, the law is the law. He almost never does. I would argue he never does. To be fair, I haven't read every single one of his rulings, but he's now had these hearings. The Republicans have had every opportunity. He has had every opportunity to say, look, no, you guys are totally wrong. Here's a case where I ruled against corporations because of the letter of the law. And he doesn't do that. He has an overwhelming record of somehow always finding a legal reason to rule in favor of the corporations and against actual human beings. And these are the same conservative judges who have the audacity to say corporations are people. So corporations are people so much that they could kill other actual human beings, and Gorsuch would let them get away with it.
So when Alphonse Maddin got fired, and this case, by the way, took 7 years because of all the appeals and everything. It was like a death sentence for his career. First of all, he had only been a truck driver for 3 years because he was a graphic designer. And then after the recession, work dried up. So he's like, I gotta do anything I can do, right? And so he started driving trucks, and that was his only means of making money. And so after he got fired, and it showed that he had abandoned the product that he was supposed to drive wherever he was supposed to drive it, people wouldn't hire him. So he was living in poverty as a result of all that. But all of this doesn't matter. Look, my point is, I can't stand things like zero tolerance policies, right? Where people in power, authorities, administrators, whatever it is, people who have positions of power refuse to use human judgment that makes sense, apply human judgment to various cases. If you don't want to apply human judgment, then you shouldn't be a judge.
So there's 3 layers of culpability here. First is, let's think about how monstrous this company TransAm is. That they told that guy, I don't care if you can't feel your feet. I don't care if it's negative 27 degrees outside, negative 14 degrees in the truck. I don't care if you're gonna die. Don't leave the product because it might cost me an extra couple of bucks. Now, I can tell you, I'm a small business owner. If one of you guys called me and said, I'm about to die, and I said, I don't care. Can you imagine what kind of a monster does that, right? But we've gotten so used to it from big business. Why do you think big business is the only thing polling worse than big media and politicians? And all those guys in the media, they never talk against big business because they're owned by big business, right? But we all in our lives have seen big business crush us. So what does the Chamber of Commerce say? They said that Gorsuch's ruling in this case, and overall his selection was, quote, fantastic. Because Chamber of Commerce represents giant multinational corporations. And they don't give a damn about your life. They don't care if you have a decent wage. In fact, they want to pay you as little as possible. And they want to grind you down to the very last ability to survive so they can make an extra buck. Because we've created these public corporations whose only directive is maximize profit and don't care about anything else. Then guys like Gorsuch claim that they're people and have constitutional rights, and that their rights supersede our rights. Well, we're actual American citizens.
You know, there was one thing that really stood out to me in this ruling, and it was how Gorsuch, who thinks of corporations as people, referred to the truck driver in this case, to Alphonse Maddin. Alphonse Maddin said, what I noticed was that in his opening reference, he simply called me a trucker and didn't use my name.
So look, the other judges humanize him, use his name. But to Gorsuch, he's just a clog in the machine. And by the way, this is the third level of culpability, and it goes directly to Gorsuch. You think he didn't know what he was doing when he ruled against every other judge who'd seen this case? This was him planting his flag saying, I will be more draconian pro-business than any other judge out there. So Trump or any other Republican, pick me, because I will serve the corporate interest better than anyone. When Al Franken asked about him, and you gotta give credit to Al Franken on the questioning here, on this particular issue, he said, look, I just wanna know, what would you have done if you were the Alphonse Maddin? He refused to answer it 3 different times. And Franken's like, look, I wanna be clear. I think it does relate to your ruling because you need to use judgment and you need to interpret the law in a way that is rational and not irrational, not absurd. But even putting aside your legal position in this case, I'm curious, what would you have done if you were him? And he's like, I can't say. And Franken was like, what do you mean you can't say? Would you have risked freezing to death or getting fired? And he's like, well, I might sympathize. What do you mean you might sympathize with him? What do you mean you don't know? And then Franken said, what do you mean you don't know? You thought about this case and you claim you're such a brilliant jurist that spent a lot of time on this. You don't know what you would have done if you were him? That's Gorsuch basically telling the Republicans, don't worry. I will never side on behalf of the small guy. I will always be on the side of corporations and use any technical, legal reason and then have that smug look on his face. Says, oh, please, I'm an originalist. By the way, the founding fathers were not originalists. They said that it is a living document, that every generation, Thomas Jefferson said, every generation has the right to interpret it in the way that they think. And so his reality is, he doesn't care about that guy. He cares about his own personal advancement. He can't put himself in his shoes because he's a conservative. He lacks all empathy. He thinks, oh, well, I do declare, I went to law school with Obama, and that's why the Democrats don't even mind me that much. And they all get paid by their corporate donors too. So I never would be a trucker. You shouldn't have let the corporations crush you. Yeah, it's your fault, not mine.
It's the inability to empathize and put yourself in that individual's shoes. So that's a huge problem with politics in general right now. But one other thing that I wanted to add, I actually want to call myself out because I made a horrible, horrible mistake when we originally started covering Gorsuch. I drank the media Kool-Aid and I was like, oh, he's not so bad, right? And so I don't want other people to fall victim to that. I should have been better. I remember that, the first time John and I talked about Gorsuch, I was like, oh, he doesn't sound that bad. He's actually educated. And I read all the glowing reviews about him in the mainstream media, and that was my mistake. He, at least when it comes to cases like this, is a deplorable human being.
And by the way, so that's really important that Anna said that, because not because of her situation, but because almost the entirety of the mainstream media is on Gorsuch's side. Now, the reason they give you is, hey, he can speak in complete sentences. At least he's not a buffoon like Donald Trump. Right. That is a very, very low bar, but that's not the real reason. The real reason is they're also controlled by giant multinational corporations. Now, they don't know that. There's no smoke-filled room where they launch a conspiracy, okay? But they are hired to like guys like Gorsuch. If you were a person who talked about big business being a problem, you don't get hired in mainstream media. Giant multi-billion-dollar companies don't hire you to talk against multi-billion-dollar companies. So then the Morning Joe crew, for example, who's now attacking Donald Trump every day because the establishment doesn't like Trump for a lot of good reasons and some illegitimate reasons, then find a guy like this and, oh, the establishment loves Gorsuch. He puts a gentle, eloquent face to a really dark, ugly world that is ruled by these robots that we have created. We are in that science fiction movie where the robots have taken over. They're legal robots called public corporations. And now they rule us, and they get their henchmen like Gorsuch to come in and set the rules, set the law so that we can never win. You either die or you get fired. But the corporation always wins because Gorsuch helps them find a way to win in either case.
We already hired one investigative reporting team thanks to you guys. Let's hire the second right now. Go to tytnetwork.com/go.